Are you considering a career in teaching? It's a noble pursuit, but let's face it, deciding to become a teacher can be a minefield of potential mistakes, because making mistakes in this decision process can definitely lead to a lack of fulfillment, definitely burnout, and feeling like you wasted so much time and money to just be stuck in this career that you hate. So let's dive into these 6 mistakes that pretty much everyone makes when deciding to become a teacher. That way we can ensure that your decision to become one leads to success both for you and your students. You know what's a mistake that you don't want to make is hitting that like and subscribe button. In fact, I'm just going to reach out. So go ahead. Let's just have an ET moment. You touch the screen. Yeah, that was pretty cool. So the first mistake that people often make when deciding to become a teacher is being unclear about their motivations for teaching. So this is basically the same thing as your why. And I know it's so cliche to say that, like, what is your why for teaching? But you really need to ask yourself, why do you want to get into this? It's honestly one of the biggest mistakes that people make when deciding to become a teacher, because they don't really understand what it entails. They know about teaching based on how they were taught, but they don't necessarily know just how hard it can be. Maybe you want to become a teacher because you heard that there is a teacher shortage and they're pretty much trying to fast track everyone to become a teacher to fill those gaps. Maybe you're really attracted to the holidays and breaks that we have, especially summer break. Maybe you have a child who's also in school and you want to have the same time off that they do, which is understandable. I think of it as the same way that you would ask yourself, why do you want to become a police officer, or why do you want to become a doctor? You really need to understand why you want to go through all that you have to do to actually get into that career and everything it entails once you're there. So for example, if you're a police officer, there's definitely a lot of risk involved in terms of putting your life on the line, a lot of reward. And if you want to become a doctor, well, you're going to be in med school forever and have a huge amount of loans, and is that worth it for you to help save people? So same thing with teaching. Why do you want to become a teacher? And when it gets really tough, is that why strong enough to stay in? This is especially important when you have people who want to discourage you from becoming a teacher. So sometimes you'll tell people that you want to become a teacher and they'll be like, why? And hey, I get it. Teaching is really tough. And so if you don't have a solid why, something that's really motivating you to do it other than breaks or, hey, I like being poor, something like that, then you're going to have a hard time defending that and really feeling confident about your decision. Because I'm going to be honest with you, if you were going to go into teaching, I really encourage you to want to see it through no matter how hard it gets. I think a lot of teachers go into this profession with this dream, or they see people who are like smiling on Instagram or TikTok and they're like, hey, I could totally do that. And then once they're in here, they're like, you know what? It's not how I imagined, and now I'm going to leave. I would prefer you just to not go in to teaching if you don't think that you can handle it. So again, what's your why? So the next mistake that people make is overlooking whether or not they actually like working with children. I know this seems obvious that you should want to work with children, whether they're in elementary, middle, or high school, but you'd be surprised by how many people go into the profession and they don't necessarily like working with kids. It's odd. It's odd. It's odd. Because here's the thing, in order for you to be effective as a teacher, you have to be willing and able to build relationships with these kids. So if you go over to someone's house and their kid is around and it's awkward, like you just have a hard time interacting with kids in general, maybe rethink whether or not you want to be a teacher. If you don't know how to talk to a high schooler in a way that doesn't make them like necessarily roll their eyes at you or walk out of the room, maybe that's not the age group that you should be working with. But if you really get along with younger students and you can talk to them in a way that gets them to listen to you and get them to be excited about what you're talking about, maybe that's the age group that you should go with. I've actually mentored teachers that are new to the profession who are second career teachers, meaning they've worked somewhere else, and they're really intelligent people. They have a lot of information, and because of that, they assume that they could teach the information. However, they lack the ability to really relate and interact with students, and also they have a really hard time breaking down concepts for other people to understand. So if you're someone who's just really, really smart in a subject area, that does not mean that you should become a teacher or that you're even going to be good at it in terms of public school. I mean, maybe at a community college or maybe at a university, but not everyone is cut out to teach in public education. Just being honest. The third mistake that so many people make when they're deciding to become a teacher is neglecting interpersonal and communication skills. I don't think I have to tell you that being able to communicate effectively is really important as a teacher. Not only because you need to break down concepts for students, but you also have to be able to hold conversations with them, hold conversations with other adults who maybe make you uncomfortable, and to also work as a team with other teachers. I mean, communication is how you convey knowledge to your students, also provide guidance to them one-on-one, and just foster an effective learning environment in general. You're going to have a very difficult time building trust with both your students and their parents, and building faith in your administrator that you know what you're doing if you can't communicate effectively. So what does this mean? It means that teaching can be really difficult if you are on the more introverted side. If you're someone who's easily intimidated by others, especially other adults, or if you can't really assert yourself in situations, you're just going to have a really difficult time getting across what you're trying to say, what you mean, because of your lack of communication and interpersonal skills. I actually know of teachers that are brilliant in the classroom, but when it comes time to working with other adults who, by the way, are just as much a part of teaching as the kids, if you can't work with other adults and talk to them and get along with them because of how you are, you're really going to struggle as a teacher. I just hate to say it. So really assess your communication skills. Are you able to explain concepts clearly? Are you able to actively listen to other people without just trying to come up with the next thing that you're going to say? Because this is really important in terms of being able to listen to students and figure out how to help them. If this is something that you struggle with, like maybe you don't get along with a lot of people, then you may want to work on your interpersonal and communication skills before becoming a teacher, because otherwise you're going to find yourself really dissatisfied in this environment. I'm just, again, being honest. The next mistake, and this is a big one, is underestimating the stress and pressure of teaching. You've probably heard some horror stories about how difficult and stressful teaching can be, and you know what? Most of them are true. I don't really think a lot of people understand the emotional demands of teaching. Again, they might see something on TikTok or Instagram in terms of a teacher who's like smiling at their students, the kids are raising their hand and the kids are interacting and everyone's having fun. And yes, that absolutely happens a lot. In fact, it happens a lot in my classroom, if I'm being honest, and it does happen a lot in classrooms across the world. However, there are also a lot of classrooms where there's constant disruptions, where there are disrespectful students, there are mean and belligerent parents, and there are administrators that are toxic, frankly. So you have to be someone who can deal with stress and pressure. You have to be someone who can work under a deadline or work under the pressure of an administrator who wants you to reach certain goals for these students, or who wants you to be a certain way and who's going to criticize the things that you do in your classroom. Can you handle that? Do you have thick enough skin? Are you someone who can handle stress and maintain your composure at the same time? Do you have enough grit to handle this job? Because it's not for the faint of heart. And maybe you're someone who likes a challenge and you're like, yeah, I can totally handle anything that you throw at me, but can you love it? Can you love the stress? And can you get to a point where you've worked out your systems enough like I have, and teaching is a lot less stressful? So this is definitely something that you need to be honest with yourself about. If you're someone who is very anxious, if you're someone who is prone to depression and anxiety, I just can't see how teaching would benefit you in any way, because it is really stressful at times. Really stressful. The next mistake that people make when deciding to become a teacher is ignoring the need for adaptability and patience. So teaching is going to require you to be flexible and adaptable at a moment's notice. So if you are someone who needs things to happen in a certain way at a certain time, teaching is not that. because you just never know. Someone is going to talk out loud in class and you're going to lose your train of thought, or they're going to yell across the room or throw something across the room and it's going to disrupt the entire class. Or without any notice, there's going to be an assembly and it's going to interrupt your lesson plans and it's going to throw your pacing off completely. And the students, teachers say this every year that,
the kids are not all right this year.
Kids have changed. And I don't know, it makes me feel old to say that, but it's true. Kids are changing. Kids are definitely different, especially post-pandemic. They were also becoming more difficult right before the pandemic, but definitely since then. You might have heard of horror stories at this point about what it's like in classrooms, and they're not all wrong. They're really not. And so, do you have patience to work with difficult students? Can you adapt to unreasonable and unideal situations with grace? I think it's really important to be able to handle things like misbehavior without losing your cool. That's the best way to get kids to not want to misbehave in your class. But I've seen time and time again, teachers snap back at students or kind of have a little meltdown when someone is misbehaving, which, by the way, it eggs on that student and makes them want to do it more. And then there are extreme cases, like maybe a student is going to tell you to F off, or they're going to swear at you, or they're just going to leave the room. What are you going to do about that? Are you going to turn red in the face and lose your cool? How adaptable and patient are you when you're working with students who have emotional trauma, students who have issues going on at home, who maybe weren't parented in a way that's effective for them? What are you going to be able to do about it in your classroom? So if you're someone who can be patient and who can adapt easily, then you're going to thrive in teaching. Not gonna lie, you're going to be put in really difficult situations and you're going to thrive regardless. But if you're someone who gets really thrown off and really frustrated and you just want to give up, you probably should reconsider whether or not you want to teach. And the next mistake that a lot of people make in terms of whether or not they should teach is failing to consider whether or not they have a strong support system. So again, teaching is not for the faint of heart, and there are going to be very many situations when you are frustrated, you want to throw your hands up, you want to give up, or you just completely delve into teaching and grading and everything and you just block everything out. If you don't have a strong support system, then you're really going to have poor work-life balance and you're probably going to give up. I mean, there are long work hours, a lot of grading, a lot of paperwork, a lot of meetings. And so these are things that you need to consider, because if you don't have someone who can pull you away from work, who can get you to spend some time on yourself and not have to worry about work, which a lot of teachers, they end up doing, then you're going to get burnt out and you're inevitably going to quit. So ask yourself, do you have friends and family who are there for you when times get really tough as a teacher? Or maybe that you have a therapist that you can talk to, or your church. Just basically ask yourself if you have the supports there, even if you feel like you're really stable and adaptable, as I mentioned before, and patient. You still want to make sure that you have some kind of system there to support you for when teaching gets really, really hard and you're ready to throw in the towel. So does this mean that you shouldn't teach? Absolutely not. I love teaching. I've been teaching for 22 years and I've got at least another 20 years left in me, and I'm sure that I'm going to enjoy it till the very end of my career. But these are just some things that you should ask yourself when you're trying to decide to become a teacher, because like I've said before, I don't think that you should even become one if you can't address all 6 of these areas and feel confident that you've got them down, that you've got them conquered. And honestly, it's not that things have always been rosy for me or that things are perfect for me, but I do see a lot of things that I struggle with as a teacher as a blessing. And so if you want to know more about why and what I'm personally struggling with as a teacher, be sure to click on this video next.